And then we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you so much for joining us today for the Trachtenberg Schools Employer Briefing with the State of Maryland Department of Management and Budget. We have 3 alumni with us here today, and there's more alumni that even work here. As we had indicated in the email that Rebecca had shared with me, that they are going to be doing anticipated hiring this spring. So we're thrilled to hear about these opportunities. And I am going to turn it over to all of you to get started. You said Christina is going to start.
Hi everyone, my name is Christina. I have been with the Department of Budget and Management for almost 6 years now. I graduated from Trachtenberg in 2016, so almost 10 years ago, which feels it's crazy when I say it out loud because it does not feel like that long ago. I had my specialization was in politics and policy, and my portfolio at OBA consists of the Department of Correctional Services, the Attorney General's Office, the Department of Emergency Management, and then some other smaller agencies. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Rebecca so she can introduce herself, and then we'll get things started after Kylia has also introduced herself.
Thanks, Christy. It's nice to be here with all of you today. My name is Rebecca Bizzari. I have been with OBA for about 4 years now. I'm a principal budget analyst. I was a double GW grad, so shout out to if there are any former GW undergrads also here. I got my MPA at Trachtenberg and specifically focused on budget and public finance. And in our office, I'm on our health team. So the bulk of my time is spent on the Maryland Medicaid program. And then I also have the Department of Aging. Kylia?
Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, my name is Kylia Gaynor. I am a current Trachtenberg student. I'm entering my 3rd year. Well, I'm about to graduate in a couple of months. I specialize in budget and public finance and also health policy. And I've been with OBA for a little over a year and a half now. I'm also on the health team and work with a few units within the Maryland Department of Health, including public health, and then a couple of other like regulatory agencies.
Awesome. So I will kick us off. Kylie, are you sharing your screen? Can I just not see it?
Yeah, I'm going to share it now.
Oh, okay.
Let me know if you can see. Good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. So I will kick things off just kind of walking through what our cycle looks like. So going through a full year, and I'll start in July because that is the start of the state fiscal year, July 1. So July and August, agencies are typically working on closing out the prior fiscal year and kind of starting out their budget process, figuring out what their requests are going to be, what their priorities are for this upcoming fiscal year and the upcoming budget process. Most agencies' budgets are due to our office September through mid-October. Smaller agencies come in first. Your larger agencies have a little bit more time. And so July and August tend to be more technical in nature for our office. September through, let's go December. September through December is like the bulk meat and potatoes of our season. We are working through all those agency budget requests that come in. I'm pretty sure all agencies have an analysis that we write on them, and the detail and length of the analysis varies depending on how large the agency is and whether or not they're going to come in for a budget hearing with our secretary, the secretary of our agency. That is typically reserved for cabinet agencies or larger agencies that have significant budgetary impacts, or maybe they have just like a lot going on policy-wise and we need to bring them in to have like a bigger conversation with them. So we'll work through those smaller agencies earlier in the fall, getting into those larger agencies, October, November. And then December is when we start our closeout process. So we've been making decisions. We make recommendations to our secretary. The agency can come in if they have a meeting, state their case, say maybe why they need funding on something we decided not to fund, or argue for more funding if we only partially funded it. Our management moves into meetings with the governor's office throughout December. We get decisions in kind of on a rolling basis, and we begin closing out our agencies. And the governor's allowance, which is what the governor's budget is called, is introduced in January. We have a constitutional deadline on when that's introduced. So our timeline is very tight, and we have no wiggle room basically on, getting it submitted. We have to print physical budget books, that's in the law, and then we have to submit the allowance to the General Assembly. So beginning of January is kind of hectic, making sure that's all finalized and done. And then legislative session kicks off, and that's through beginning of April. During the legislative session, our office is watching all the budget hearings. So our counterparts at the legislature basically do an analysis on the governor's allowance for each agency. Some agencies are broken out into several meetings. And we basically have to watch those hearings to make sure that, everyone's staying on message and playing nice. And we also have to review the legislature's analyses, make sure that what they're writing up is kind of correct and what we're actually doing. They don't always write it up correctly. After that, we are also tracking legislation that may impact the state, may impact our agency, DBM, or may have an impact on anyone in our portfolio. We tend to work really closely with agencies on these fiscal notes since they are the experts, but sometimes, we are asked to weigh in terms of like what are current operations, do they have funding to support this, would they be able to absorb the costs? So we are monitoring legislation all of session, and Rebecca actually kind of handles that process in our office. After the General Assembly passes the budget in conference committee, it goes to the governor, he signs it. He is able to line item veto any new spending initiatives added by the legislature, only those impacting the executive branch. After April, May, and June, it tends to kind of slow down for us. We're doing kind of technical cleanup in our office, little things like making sure things are ready for agencies for when they go to submit in the fall, kind of writing transition guides if we're going to get new agency portfolios. We do a lot of site visits over the summer. It's our time to use our leave because we tend to accrue quite a bit of comp time over the fall. So everyone's taking their leave before we start up again. So what does an OBA analyst do? As I mentioned, the real meat and potatoes of our job is that portion in the fall, that September through, November, when we're analyzing budgets, writing our analyses, and making recommendations. So agencies will send us a list of their funding requests, and our job is to ask a whole bunch of questions on those funding requests, check to see, can they absorb these costs within their existing operations? What happens if we don't fund something? Are there ramifications? Is this a program that is required to be funded? Do they need to do this right now? Can they wait? What are the current expenditures of the agency? So we really go deep dive into our agencies to have a good understanding of what are driving expenditures, what are driving their big costs. Can we do anything to mitigate those costs, especially in this year that we're in right now, where revenues are low? We potentially have to raise taxes to make up for deficits that we have because we can't sustain our ongoing expenditures, and obviously that's never a popular thing to do. So we are extremely fiscally looking with a magnifying glass to see where can we find solutions to problems. Can we get creative? If you have an agency for a long time, you tend to be the expert on that agency. Sometimes being the person that everyone comes to, your management will come and just ask you a question because you will get that level of knowledge, and that can be really fun. I've had the Department of Corrections my whole time here, so I kind of know them like the back of my hand now, and it is great, but you can also change out portfolios as you want as well. We get really close to our agencies. We do site visits, we do meetings. I've had the privilege, I guess, of visiting every prison in the state, which has been fun. in its own way. But it really gives you like puts a face to the name on the issues. So when I get a critical maintenance funding request from the agency, it's not just, oh, you know, the roof is leaking. I've like seen it. I know the roof, I know the windows are broken or whatever it is. And you can articulate your points way better knowing the agency on that level. We also provide a lot of technical advice and assistance to our agencies, especially with larger agencies. They tend to be very like siloed. So like the finance department isn't involved with like the legislative department, and they're not involved with the procurement department. And because we are looking at the agency as a whole and following the budget process the whole year, we have this really like holistic vision of how everything happens. And so we tend to like connect the dots for agencies a lot on other things. We provide a lot of like statewide support, and then just support with our budget system, because it's our system that we manage and they're the ones that have to like input into that system. We also analyze and evaluate the performance data that agencies submit to us in their managing for results, which is their MFR. We use that to make budget decisions. It is published with their budget. We also publish a performance report, and it kind of like tracks certain metrics that the agencies, sometimes the legislature tells them, sometimes they just provide their own metrics. And then, as I mentioned, we analyze any proposed legislation, determine fiscal impacts, and then kind of have to track that along the process, make sure if it does have a fiscal impact that we're funding it maybe in the next fiscal year. And with that, I will turn it over to Kylia.
Thanks, Christina. Okay, a little bit about working as a budget analyst. So we like to say a lot of the times that our job requires both sides of the brain. So half of it, we are working with numbers and more quantitative data. But then the other side of it is we are creating strong relationship skills within the office and outside of the office. Agency relationship building is one example of that. We communicate with our agencies very often, sometimes daily, depending on the assignments that you have. We are able to focus on specific policy areas. So we have like a health team, we have a social services team, an education team, an environment team. So when we have interviews for people coming on, we ask about what are people's interests. And just because you're put on a specific portfolio when you start, we always reevaluate at the end of every budget season, and you're able to say like, I'm interested in this, maybe I'd want to work on this team. We have a high level of influence, so we work directly with cabinet secretaries, with the governor's office personnel, with DBM management on the work that we do. And they really take our opinions and our thoughts into perspective when they are making decisions. Like Christina mentioned, even for like fiscal notes, where the agency handles them mostly, we are also asked for our input, and they take what we say seriously. If we think, hey, this is actually going to have a bigger impact than we originally thought, or maybe we don't think it's going to have as big of an impact. We're able to attend site visits to understand agency operations and programs. This is usually the time where people start to do site visits throughout up to August. We have some photos here of examples. One of our analysts went to the Maryland Cannabis Administration, I think the Public Television Administration. So we're able to do those kind of things. Two of them that I went to this past summer, that was really fun. I went to the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner and the MDH Laboratories Administration, and it was extremely cool to see those things. And then lastly, we are encouraged to attend relevant conferences. So we have NASBO, the National Association of State Budget Officers. I was also able to attend that my first year coming on. We have NASHP, the National Association of State Health Policy, I believe. But we have a lot of relevant conferences that we are able to attend. Why Maryland? So Maryland State has a really strong executive budget process, and we do have a lot of influence as a budget analyst on state policy. The legislature has new legislative powers that started in fiscal year 2024. But the legislature can only realign, but not add to the budget. In state government, we're in a sweet spot versus like local or federal government positions. Local can be really like on the minuscule level, and then federal government can be on the real macro level. So state government is that nice in between where you can see the work that you do every day. You can see the results that they yield. We have a great office culture. We often indulge in happy hours and team lunches when we're all in the office. So it's pretty fun to work there, if I do say so myself. Workflow and seasons. So during our budget season or budget formulation, we are more busy during that time. So I would say that's roughly September to like mid-January. That's our busiest time. But then during the spring and summer, we have a less busier time where analysts can take vacations, often 2-week-long vacations. And since during the busy time, we accrue comp time, if we're working extra hours to make sure we submit the budget on time, we can use all that time in the spring. And then lastly, Annapolis is a great city to work in. It's beautiful, and you have a few options of where you want to live. Some people live in Annapolis, some people live in DC, Baltimore. I actually live in Virginia, Arlington, Virginia, and I do the commute every day. So you have some options in the area, the DMV area. Okay, I'm gonna pass it over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Kylia. So why should you consider becoming a budget analyst with DBM in Maryland right now? I think we're in a really exciting time right now to work in state government. Obviously, there are a lot of fluctuations in the federal government, but there's still so much work to be done as a state. And we have the benefit of having incredible leadership under the Moore Miller administration. We've listed here the 10 priorities of the Moore Miller administration. I recommend, if you end up applying, familiarizing yourself with these because they're really intertwined with the work of our office and the work we do for each of our agencies. It is a really cool opportunity to be a part of like a really still pretty new and very invigorated administration who's committed to leaving no Marylanders behind. I also think that our office is really unique in that we are completely committed to continuous improvement. You've got a lot of like nerds who are absolutely determined to like refine every process. If we find a weakness, we want to find a solution. We always want to be optimizing. And one of the ways that we do that is by adding new positions, which is why we have so many openings coming up this year. That's really exciting. Our structure is always evolving. We're always creating new opportunities for people to grow and develop. And I think in government, that sort of commitment to continuous improvement is pretty rare. So I think that's something we do really, really well and maybe aren't as bogged down by bureaucracy that you find elsewhere. You also have the opportunity to see things that like are in the news all the time. It's that sweet spot where you're seeing things happening on the micro and macro level. You're seeing things being reported in news, and you'll know the behind the scenes. You'll be like, well, I was just in a meeting with the health secretary on this issue last week, or I was just doing a briefing for my secretary, the other day for these things. It really allows you to like stay up to date with what's going on in the news, what's impacting Marylanders, and having like a meaningful impact as you go along. We don't just like produce the budget and wait to see what happens. I feel like we're engaging with it constantly and we're being really nimble as things are happening, as policies are being passed and things are going on in the world. I also think that we have the added benefit of having a really flexible telework policy in the state of Maryland. Statewide, we've been really committed to maintaining remote work access and also enhancing staff culture by having folks in the office part-time. So right now, staff have the choice to be fully in person or to work up to 3 days a week at home or remotely. Our in-person days are designed to overlap. So typically in our office, you'll see people doing like Tuesday and Wednesday or Wednesday and Thursday. And that is really designed so that we can have collaboration and team engagement. And that is usually when we plan those happy hours and office lunches that Kylia was talking about. So going on to our application process, our Application is not live yet. It will be very, very shortly, but we are going to be hiring 7 new budget analyst positions this year. We tend to bring in budget analysts in sort of like a cohort model. So we're going to have a pretty big cohort of 7 folks this year. Most those will be hired in a range between budget analyst 1 to 3. 3 is what's known as a senior budget analyst, and you can see the salary range here for that. We do typically hire most folks, especially if you're fresh out of grad school, at a budget analyst 1. But I think the great thing about our job is there's continuous room for development. There's continuous room for promotions. There are things, opportunities at a management level that open up. So even if you come in as a 1, there's a really clear track of growth for you to continue to develop and evolve. Once the application is live, we will share the link with Denise to be circulated with the Trachtenberg community. It'll remain open, I believe, from the 17th of March to April 4th, and it's all online. You will be asked to complete a short budget exercise during that. I know when I heard that, I was really freaked out. I was like, oh my God, am I gonna have to do a pivot table or like some funky thing in Excel? It's not designed to be a gotcha. It's really just like a basic Excel exercise, and then seeing how you work, seeing how you communicate data into a written format. So don't freak out. I'm sure your classwork at Trachtenberg has prepared you for that. And then we will have 2 rounds of interviews for the positions. Typically, one is like with more lower level management and analysts, so you can kind of get a sense of the vibe in the office. And then the second round is typically with our leadership. And then we have a start date flexibility to accommodate different graduation dates for different programs. So even though we do a cohort model, not everybody starts on the same date. We also want you all to have some time after you graduate or whatever's going on in your life. So you'll be able to negotiate that and find a date that works for you if you're offered a position. And I think we're on the last slide now, which is you are welcome to reach out to any of us. We all would be happy to connect with you. I think we are all living proof of ways that we connected with alumni before we ended up in this role. We're happy to support you. We love having GW grads in the office. And if you have any questions or tips, or you want to talk about other budgeting jobs or life, whatever, feel free to reach out to us. Our emails are here. And we'll follow up and send the contact information again after today. So I think we have 5 minutes left. I don't know, Denise, if you want to take questions.
I would love to see if there's any questions. This is great, man. I wish I was younger and right out of grad school. I would be applying for this as a budget analyst. This looks great. I'd love to hear questions from any of our students or alum on today's session.
I had a quick question about the openings. So you said there's a lot of portfolios for analysts. Would the openings be for specific portfolios, or would people be matched to those after the application hiring process?
I can take this one. So it's a bit of a squishy process. We don't hire, we don't say, oh, there's 1 position available on the health team, there's 3 positions on the environment team. We don't hire based on that. We try to find the best candidates, but we do ask you for your policy interests. And then every year when we're kind of reshuffling office assignments, we take that into consideration with building the team. So for example, last year we hired a new member of the health team. And when she first started, we weren't sure if we were going to be able to fit her into the health team. We were going to kind of slot her into the other area of the office. And then things moved around and we were able to slot her into health team. So we're kind of always in flux, and we really do keep people's interests in mind. So just be as clear as you can in advocating for yourself and saying what your policy interests are and showing what experience you have. And we'll kind of use that to find the best place for you. And they can also change over time. Maybe your first year, maybe your assignments aren't as relevant to your policy interests, but then the next year, if something opens up, you can always switch around. Plenty of us have done that.
Other questions people have? This is your opportunity. Get the scoop you need before these positions come out. I'll ask one while we're waiting. You're obviously going to be inundated with applications. What's a differentiator? What can students think about in terms of, if you're a student now or an alum, how to put this on your resume, or if a student is finishing up the semester, what's a differentiator on what's going to rise to the top, that somebody you're going to want to bring in an interview?
I'll jump in first and then maybe if anyone else wants to jump in. One thing we really like to see is how your prior experience, or maybe even Trachtenberg class experience, can be related to the work. So maybe you didn't do something specifically connected to the work that you would be doing if you got hired, but how can some of the skills that you've acquired also be used for this type of work?
I can also add to that, unless Christina, you wanted to jump in. I think that Trachtenberg classes in particular offer you a lot of opportunities. Like I talked about my capstone experience in both my resume and in like one of the written exercises that go along with the application. I think I talked about the little mini project I did in my program evaluation class. So there's opportunities to kind of talk about almost like project management experience through Trachtenberg assignments, or things you've learned. Maybe it's like a paper you've done, like policy analysis, other things. Really try to paint those pictures with very clear examples. And then I would say in an interview, to help you stand out, showing your like interpersonal and communication skills. It sounds so basic, but you would be surprised how many people, I think, especially when they see a role like budget analyst, they think, oh, I'm an accountant. You're not an accountant. So much of our job is relationship management. And we can get a really good feel for that when we're talking to you in an interview. So talk about how you've managed relationships, talk about how you've managed conflict, talk about how you have dealt with competing priorities. We all have experience with that. And I think the interview is the space to really let that shine.
Yeah, I was gonna say what Rebecca was saying too about I didn't have any prior budget experience and I was definitely intimidated by that, but I was able to talk about my capstone and having to reach out to the stakeholder that we were engaging with, asking a bunch of questions, and like that is a lot of what we do is you have to communicate with people that sometimes are in positions that may seem above yours or that are older than you or have more experience than you, and you have to poke and prod and try to get answers in a respectful, professional way. And sometimes they can get defensive or be difficult. And how do you manage those situations? And are you able to navigate that and maintain your relationship with the agency, even if worst case scenario, their things don't get funded or there's tension between their agency leadership and ours? Like we are very much in a position of like kind of mediating things a lot. So if you're able to highlight how you deal with those things and manage competing priorities, because the fall is very busy and stressful, and it's also just kind of a stressful time of year in life with a lot of holidays and family commitments. How can you balance that? If you're able to show that and show that you can kind of power through that time, that's super important for us.
I think we are at time. So if there's no other questions, I want to thank all of you for this phenomenal presentation. As I said, I wish I could apply. This is really wonderful. We appreciate you providing these insights, and also as Trachtenberg alumni sharing with all of us, our current students, soon to be alum, sharing this with us. And we look forward to when the openings happen, to be continuing to disseminate that with our students. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Denise. We'll follow up with the
You.
presentation material.